What if I told you that the single most important moment of your entire day isn't the one where you succeed, or fail, or speak, or decide, but the thin, almost invisible instant right before you react? That moment you usually rush past. That breath you never quite notice. That flicker of awareness where something inside you pauses before the old pattern takes over. If you're seeing this, you're already closer to that moment than you realize, because the truth is this: you were meant to notice it. You were meant to stand inside that small, sacred gap and pass a test reality keeps giving you over and over again, not as punishment, not as judgment, but as an initiation into a different level of consciousness. One where you stop living as a reactor and begin living as the observer. Imagine for a moment that every reaction you've ever had, every flare of anger, every defensive comment, every spiral of self-doubt, every quiet shutting down wasn't proof of who you are, but merely the echo of an older version of you acting without your permission. Most people never interrupt that echo. They assume their reactions are their identity. They repeat the same emotional choreography for years without noticing that a tiny doorway appears before every reaction, inviting them to step through it. And what lies beyond that doorway is a different future, a different timeline, a different way of being, not through force, not through willpower, but through noticing. Right before you react, the entire field around you shifts into a kind of holding pattern. You can feel it if you pay attention. The breath catches slightly. The body leans forward as if bracing for impact. The mind begins assembling the usual story it always tells. But underneath all of that, there is a stillness. A quiet, almost imperceptible sense of being suspended, as if the universe is whispering, "This is the test. This is the threshold. This is your moment to choose." Most people never hear that whisper because they're moving too fast inside themselves. They go straight from trigger to meaning to reaction, as if there were no space between them. But quantum experience, your lived, emotional version of the observer effect, begins in that space. It begins the moment you realize you are not the turbulence. You are the sky holding it. You are not the river of thoughts rushing through you. You are the riverbank quietly witnessing the flow. And the field responds not to your fear, not to your habit, not to your old script, but to your awareness. So the real question is this: what happens the instant you notice? What happens when you slow the sequence by even half a second and observe the reaction forming before it becomes action? The old loop weakens, the narrative dissolves, and suddenly, you're no longer trapped inside the same emotional gravity. You're standing outside it, watching it from a wider, clearer place. A place where choice returns. A place where coherence becomes possible. A place where the future bends ever so slightly toward a new direction. If you're seeing this, you didn't arrive by accident. You arrived because some part of you is ready to reclaim that gap, that doorway, that exquisitely quiet moment right before the reaction, the one you were meant to notice all along. And once you learn how to stand there as the observer, everything about your reality begins to change. To understand why that tiny gap before you react matters so much, you first have to see the loop you've been living inside, not as an abstract idea, but as a living pattern you can start to recognize in real time. Think of your daily life as a series of triggering moments: a text left on seen, a bank notification that tightens your chest, a tone of voice that pricks an old wound. These are the sparks. But the spark isn't the whole fire. The fire is what happens next, almost automatically, as if a hidden script inside you wakes up and starts running its familiar lines. You experience a trigger. Your breath changes first, often before you even notice. It becomes shallow, tight, held. That subtle shift in breathing quietly alters your inner state. Heart rate changes. Muscles tense, attention narrows. From that state, your mind rushes in to assign meaning. They don't respect me. I'm in danger. I always mess this up. The meaning then drives an action. You snap, withdraw, over-explain, shut down, overpromise, scroll, eat, blame, run. That action produces evidence in the outer world. A conflict, an awkward silence, a missed opportunity, a drained account, another night lying awake. And that evidence loops back in and reinforces the original meaning. See? This always happens to me. Trigger breath divided by state, meaning action, evidence, stronger belief. Around and around. This is your reality loop. The most painful part is that the loop feels true because it keeps repeating. You can point to actual events, real messages, real bank statements, real arguments and say, "Look, this isn't in my head." And you're right, the events are real. But what you rarely see is the invisible architecture underneath them, the way unobserved breath, unobserved state, and unobserved meaning are quietly shaping the kind of events you keep getting. You try to fix the evidence. You change jobs, partners, cities, routines. You promise yourself you'll stay calm next time. You read books, repeat affirmations, design vision boards. But when the trigger appears again, your nervous system goes back to its old choreography faster than your affirmations can load. Not because you're weak, but because the loop is running deeper than the words sitting in your mind. It's encoded in your most immediate responses. How you breathe, how you brace, how you interpret. Over time, this loop starts to feel less like a pattern and more like fate. You begin to narrate your life as if it were a fixed story. I'm always too much. People always leave. Money is always hard. These sentences sound like observations, but they are actually conclusions drawn from years of unexamined loops. Every time the pattern repeats, your brain highlights it and says, "See, this is just how life is for you." The moments that don't fit the story get ignored or minimized. The coherent, supportive, loving experiences slide past your attention, while the familiar pain gets amplified. Reality starts to feel rigged, not against humanity in general, but specifically against you. This is the perceptual crisis. You don't just hurt, you start to believe the hurt is a fixed law of your existence. In this crisis, the quantum metaphor of the observer effect becomes more than physics trivia. It becomes a mirror. In the lab, particles don't behave exactly the same when they're observed. In your life, reactions don't behave the same when they're observed either. But when you're fully inside the loop, triggered, braced, believing every thought, the observer in you is offline, you forget there is a part of you that can stand on the riverbank and watch the current. You become the current. You become the storm. And from inside the storm, it's nearly impossible to imagine stillness exists. This is why the just think positive approach often feels insulting to your actual experience. It tries to paste new meanings on top of an unchanged state. It skips the body. It skips the breath. It skips the gap. If your breath is still contracted, your shoulders still tense, your awareness still locked onto threat, the new thought doesn't land in fertile soil. It lands on stone. You might repeat, "I am safe," while your entire system is broadcasting, "I am under attack." That inner conflict becomes yet another piece of evidence that nothing works for me. And the loop tightens again. The crisis deepens when you start blaming yourself for not being able to escape it. You look at other people who seem calmer, wealthier, more loved, more chosen, and assume they were given something you weren't. You don't see that they too had to meet their own loops at the level of awareness, not performance. You might hear about concepts like quantum timelines or manifestation, and secretly wonder why. If consciousness creates reality, yours keeps creating the same thing. You question your worth, your destiny, even your sanity. If the field is responding to you, why does it keep sending you the same test? Here is the quiet answer most people never receive. The test isn't whether you can control every trigger or guarantee every outcome. The test is whether you can notice the moment right before the loop takes over. That is the exam question life keeps placing in front of you. Can you feel the first tightening of the breath and recognize it? Can you sense the first wave of meaning forming, "Here we go again," and gently pause it? Can you stand at the threshold of reaction long enough to remember that you are the observer, not the storm? Right now, without changing anything, you can begin to see your recent past through this lens. Think of the last time you snapped at someone you care about, or spiraled over money, or shut down in a conversation where you wanted to stay open. If you replay that memory slowly, you will notice the sequence. Something happened. Your body shifted, a story lit up in your mind, and then you behaved from inside that story. Afterward, you collected the evidence and filed it under, "This is who I am," or "This is how life treats me." But what if you revise that memory and insert a single, luminous frame before the reaction? A frame where you notice your breath, your chest, your jaw, your inner commentary. A frame where you see yourself beginning to react and, for just half a second, you stay with that seeing instead of moving. That frame is the one reality has been trying to show you. That frame is where the loop can be rewritten. That is the crisis point and the doorway in one. You are not broken for being caught in these loops. You are human. Every nervous system develops patterns to survive. The crisis is not a verdict. It is an invitation to subtlety, to move from living as an unconscious participant inside your reactions to living as the one who notices them, the observer, the still sky behind the weather. And once you begin to inhabit that observer, even for a breath, the loop you thought was your fate begins to reveal itself as what it always was, a pattern waiting to be seen so it can finally start to soften, unravel, and open into something new. To understand why noticing matters, you have to feel how awareness reshapes experience from the inside out, not as philosophy and not as physics trivia, but as the lived, heartbeat-level version of the observer effect. When scientists talk about observation changing a particle's behavior, they're describing something subtle. The system reorganizes itself in the presence of attention, not forced attention, not anxious attention, simply awareness. And while your life isn't a particle experiment, your inner world behaves in a strikingly similar way. When you observe a reaction forming and you truly observe it, without diving inside it, the reaction doesn't vanish, but it becomes less inevitable. It stops being the entire sky and becomes a cloud drifting across it. Awareness holds it differently. Awareness changes its trajectory. Awareness alters what comes next. Think of your inner world as a field, your emotional field, your mental field, your somatic field. Most people assume their reactions are happening to them, but something remarkable occurs the moment you step back and actually witness them. When you observe the tightening in your chest before you speak, the field shifts. When you observe the urge to defend, to prove, to hide, to attack, the field softens. Observation introduces coherence. Coherence doesn't mean perfection. It means alignment, your breath, your body, your intention, your presence beginning to move in the same direction instead of pulling against each other. And coherence is what the quantum metaphor points to, a system settling into harmony because it's being held with awareness instead of fear. You've felt incoherence before. It's that scrambled sensation when your thoughts want one thing, your emotions want another, your body is bracing for impact, and your breath is caught somewhere between holding and gasping. Incoherence is the storm. When you react from that state, everything you say or do carries the storm's energy. Your words land sharp or flat or misunderstood. Your decisions feel urgent, pressured, or skewed. Your reality arranges itself around that internal turbulence. This is the lived experience of collapse, the moment you unconsciously assign meaning to your trigger and then act from within that meaning. The field around you collapses into the familiar outcome, the conflict, the withdrawal, the disappointment, the shame, the panic. And because it's familiar, your brain labels it true. This is how people treat me. This is my emotional destiny. This is just my personality. But none of these are truth. They're collapsed timelines, born from a state of incoherence. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine noticing the incoherence as it's beginning, not after the reaction, but before. Imagine feeling the storm forming in your chest and, instead of automatically bracing, something in you becomes still. Not rigid, not frozen, just gently aware. You feel the breath change. You feel the heat rise. You hear the internal voice preparing its usual monologue. But you don't identify with it. You don't merge with the storyline. You stand on the riverbank. You observe. And in that observation, the field inside you starts to rearrange itself. Your breath deepens naturally, without you forcing it. The pressure in your chest loosens a little. The urgency fades. A tiny pocket of stillness appears behind the emotion. This is coherence emerging. Coherence is not emotional numbness. It's emotional clarity. It's the difference between being inside a wave and watching the wave pass from the shore. The wave still exists, but you are no longer drowning inside it. You're witnessing its shape, and the moment you witness the shape, you gain access to choice. The observer effect is not about controlling emotions or suppressing them. It's about holding them with enough spaciousness that they stop dictating your behavior. It's about letting the field breathe. You might think of this as stepping into the quantum gap within yourself, the space between stimulus and reaction, between thought and identity, between feeling and interpretation. That gap isn't empty. It's full of possibility. When you step into it, your inner field becomes less chaotic, and coherence begins reorganizing your experience. The future becomes less predetermined because you are no longer acting from the same automatic state. You're no longer collapsing the same outcome. You're not forcing a new timeline, you're allowing one. This is why a single moment of noticing can feel like time slows, because it actually does, emotionally, experientially. When you observe your inner world with presence, you create a micro-pause, and in that pause, the reactive loop loses its grip. Most people never consciously experience this because they move too quickly. But when you start observing the first shift in breath, the first clench in the jaw, the first surge of heat, you begin entering a slower time. Not external time, but inner time, the time in which choice lives. Picture this. You're about to say something sharp. You feel the impulse rising like a wave. Normally, you'd ride the wave without thinking. But this time you notice it. You feel the breath hitch, the chest contract, the mind sharpen. You don't try to fix it, you just observe. And suddenly, there's a softening like a muscle, unclenching around the truth. The coherence emerges. You choose a different response. Or you choose silence. Or you choose a breath. That single shift, tiny as it seems, collapses into a new outcome. A moment that could have spiraled into conflict becomes connection. A moment that could have triggered shame becomes self-respect. A moment that could have reinforced an old identity becomes proof that change is possible. This is the emotional reality of the observer effect. Observation reorganizes the field. Awareness changes the trajectory. Presence opens a new timeline. And when you begin to feel this happening inside your own experience, something astonishing becomes clear. The universe isn't asking you to control everything. It's asking you to notice. Because noticing is the hinge on which coherence turns. And coherence is the doorway through which a different future enters. To really feel the power of this shift from reaction to observation, it helps to step inside an older language, one humanity has used for thousands of years to describe inner change, long before anyone spoke of quantum fields or coherence. Every culture had its way of mapping the invisible. The Egyptians saw consciousness not as an idea, but as architecture. The Buddhists saw it as sky and clouds. The Hebrews saw it as breath layered with breath, nefesh, ruach, neshama, each one a different dimension of being. These metaphors weren't decoration. They were teaching tools meant to help people recognize the same doorway you are learning to notice now. The moment right before a reaction becomes a destiny. Imagine walking into an Egyptian temple at dawn. The columns rise like enormous ribs, each one carved with symbols of the inner world. The ancient priests believed that consciousness had chambers, just like the temple itself. External architecture mirrored internal architecture. You entered through a wide courtyard, your everyday self, full of thought, noise, personality, preference. But as you walked deeper, the halls narrowed, the light dimmed, the air cooled. Voices fell away. Your footsteps slowed. You shifted from the world of noise to the world of stillness. This deepening wasn't just physical. It was psychological, emotional, spiritual. It was the inward journey toward the Holy of Holies, the silent chamber where the divine was said to communicate. The Egyptians believed that in this innermost chamber, one didn't react, one listened. Your own inner life has this same architecture. When a trigger hits, you stand at the temple's entrance, bright, loud, reactive, full of movement. But the observer in you resides much deeper, behind the first hall, behind the noise of meaning, behind the heat of emotion. The observer is the innermost chamber, the quiet space, where you don't explain or defend or panic. You simply notice. And the moment you shift your awareness from the courtyard to the inner chamber, even for one breath, your entire inner temple reorganizes around you. This is why noticing feels like a descent, like stepping into a cooler, quieter room inside yourself. You haven't suppressed anything, you've simply walked deeper. Buddhist teachers offered the same map in a different form, the sky and the clouds. They said the mind has two layers. The first layer is the cloud, mind thoughts passing, changing shape, forming storms, fear clouds, anger clouds, self-doubt clouds. These clouds are not wrong, they're simply weather. But the second layer is sky mind vast, undisturbed awareness that holds all of it without becoming any of it. When you react, you're inside the clouds. blinded by their density. When you observe, you lift even slightly into sky mind. The clouds don't disappear, but you see their edges. You see their movement. You see that they were never permanent. This is what noticing does. It lifts you just high enough to see the shape of the storm without being swallowed by it. The Hebrew mystics described this transition through breath itself. They said the human being is layered, like a flame. Nefesh is the body breath, the survival layer, the part of you that reacts fast, protects you, contracts when threatened. Ruach is the wind breath, the emotional layer, the part that creates meaning, stories, interpretations. Neshama is the soul breath, the witnessing layer, the part that sees without collapsing into the drama. To live unconsciously is to be ruled by Nefesh and Ruach alone, constantly reacting from fear and meaning. But to wake up is to remember Neshama, the quiet observer that breathes beneath every breath you take. The mystics said that every time you pause before reacting, even for a heartbeat, you are inhaling from Neshama. You are pulling wisdom from the deeper layer of your own being. All these metaphors, temples, skies, breath flames are pointing to the same truth. The moment right before you react is a threshold, a doorway, a crossing point between two worlds inside you. On one side is the old loop, predictable, familiar, reactive, rooted in memory. On the other side is the observer, quiet, present, capable of choosing a different path. Every tradition in history agreed on this. The threshold is subtle. If you don't know it exists, you storm past it. But if you learn to feel it, reality begins to open inwardly in ways that feel almost mythic. In ancient Egypt, this threshold was symbolized by Ma'at, the feather of truth. Souls in the afterlife were said to be weighed against her feather, not punished, not judged, but measured for inner lightness. In modern terms, this feather represents coherence. When you react from fear, your inner world becomes heavy, dense, collapsed. When you observe, your inner world becomes lighter, more spacious, more truthful. You pass the test, not because you perform perfectly, but because you remain aware. Awareness is lightness. Awareness is the feather. And here's the most important part. The feather does not judge the storm. It measures the stillness behind it. It asks not, did you feel anger? But, did you notice the anger? Not, did you stay calm? But did you remain aware? Not, did you avoid the trigger? But did you remain present as it rose? This is the test life keeps giving you, not of morality, but of awareness. Not of perfection, but of noticing. So when you feel that shift in breath, that tightening in the body, that rush of story, know this. You are standing at a doorway older than your lifetime, older than your culture, older than language itself. You are standing where countless humans before you have stood at the threshold between cloud and sky, between outer hall and inner chamber, between Nefesh and Neshama. And each time you choose to notice, you step through that doorway with a little more grace, a little more coherence, a little more truth, a little more of your own ancient self, remembering who you've always been beneath the reaction. All of this becomes real only when it enters your body, not as a concept, not as an intention, but as a felt experience, something you can return to in the middle of a difficult moment. So let's step gently into a practice. Not a ritual to perform perfectly, not a technique to force, but a doorway you can walk through whenever the old loop begins to rise. Remember, this is educational guidance, not medical instruction. If at any point your breath feels uncomfortable, simply return to a natural rhythm. The purpose here is awareness, not control. Begin by noticing where your attention sits right now. Don't change anything, just become aware. Sense how your body is arranged in this moment, how your shoulders rest, how your jaw holds, how your stomach feels. You're not judging, you're mapping. This mapping is the first step toward coherence, because it teaches you to see your inner world exactly as it is. Now bring your awareness to your breath, but do not deepen it yet. Simply feel the inhale as it arrives, and the exhale as it leaves. Notice how your breath moves without your help. Notice if it's fast, slow, shallow, tight. Again, you're not fixing anything. You're observing. This moment, this simple witnessing is the beginning of the observer state. Now, very gently, begin expanding your breath through what I call oval breathing. It's a smooth, rounded inhale, not sharp, not forced, and an equally smooth exhale, as if your breath were tracing an elongated oval inside your chest. The shape matters less than the feeling. Continuous, unbroken, soft. Try an inhale for a count of 4, and exhale for a count of 4. But if counting feels mechanical, drop it. Keep the softness, keep the continuity. You're teaching your breath to become coherent, so your awareness can widen. As you continue this oval breath, bring your attention to the point just below your sternum, the solar plexus, the place where so many of your reactions originate. Don't try to relax it, just feel it. This is where the loop often begins. This is where the breath tightens before the mind even forms a thought. As you breathe, imagine your awareness resting on this point the way a feather rests on water lightly, without pressure. Observe any sensation that arises. Heat, tingling, tightness, spaciousness. This gentle contact is how you begin to meet your reactions before they solidify. Now shift your attention to the space just behind your face, behind your eyes, behind your forehead, behind the swirl of thoughts. There is a quiet region there, almost like the back of a cave, where your mind becomes less noisy. You don't have to empty your thoughts. You simply notice them from further away. With each oval breath, feel yourself drawing back into that quiet region, as if your awareness were settling onto a comfortable seat behind your thoughts. This is the riverbank. This is the sky behind the clouds. This is the inner chamber of your temple. Next, bring your awareness to the gap between your breaths, not by holding your breath, but by noticing the natural pause at the top of the inhale and the natural pause at the bottom of the exhale. These pauses are tiny, often less than a second, but they are the doorway into stillness. In those brief moments, your breath, body, and mind enter a micro-silence. This silence is not empty. It is a turning space, where your nervous system resets before the next wave. Feel these pauses without trying to lengthen them. Just notice, this is the same gap that appears right before you react in daily life. Learning to feel it here teaches you to recognize it under pressure. Now let's add a micro-protocol for real-world moments. The kind you can use anywhere, quietly, without anyone noticing. I call it the 3 noticings. First, notice the breath shift. When something triggers you, a text, a tone, a memory, feel the first alteration in your breath. That tiny hitch, that shallow inhale, that tightening in the ribs. This is your early warning system. Second, notice the body signal. The solar plexus tightening, the jaw clenching, the shoulders rising. This is where the loop wants to take over. Third, notice the meaning forming. The first sentence your mind begins to tell you. Here we go. They're judging me. I'm failing. The moment you notice the sentence forming, you've already shifted into the observer. You're on the riverbank, not in the river. Once you reach that third noticing, take one oval breath. Just one. Let the inhale be smooth. Let the exhale soften. This single breath creates enough coherence for your awareness to widen, so you can choose your response instead of reacting automatically. You can do this in a meeting, in a conversation, in an argument, in a car, in a grocery line. No one will know, but your inner field will know. Your nervous system will know. The old loop will feel the interruption. Another micro-protocol, especially for heavy emotional moments, is what I call hand plus breath. Place one hand lightly on the center of your chest, not pressing, just resting. The hand brings awareness to the part of your body where your reaction concentrates. Then take 2 oval breaths. Feel the warmth of your own palm. Feel the movement beneath it. This simple gesture is powerful because it connects observation with sensation. It makes your awareness 3-dimensional. And for moments when you need grounding, use the lowering. On your exhale, imagine your awareness sinking from your head into your torso, then into your belly, then into your hips. It's not visualization so much as a sensation of descending. Many reactions live in the upper body. Lowering your awareness brings you into the temple's deeper chambers. It slows the whole system. These practices aren't about calmness. They're about coherence. You're not trying to erase emotion, you're learning to hold it from a deeper layer of yourself. And the more often you practice, not perfectly, not dramatically, just consistently, the more the observer state becomes a lived experience rather than a concept. You begin noticing earlier, recovering faster, choosing more clearly, and little by little, the threshold you once raced past becomes the place you naturally inhabit. The old loop no longer owns you. The observer does. There comes a moment in this journey where the inner work stops feeling like reflection and starts feeling like power, quiet power. Not the loud kind the world chases, but the grounded kind that rearranges everything from the inside out. This is the turning point, the shift from living as a victim of your loop to living as the creator of your field. It isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that your state shapes your story, and your story shapes your strategy, and your strategy shapes your life. The order matters. Most people try to change their strategy first. They try new habits, new communication techniques, new planners, new hustle routines. But if the state underneath hasn't shifted, the strategy collapses back into the same pattern. The real turning point begins the moment you understand. Your state is the first creation. Your reality is the second. Imagine you're walking through your day and something disrupts your peace. Before, you would have reacted instantly, tightening, bracing, interpreting, spiraling. Now, after practicing awareness of your breath, your body, your meaning-making, you begin to notice earlier. You catch the first shift instead of the 20th. That noticing moves you out of the victim posture, life is happening to me, and into the creator posture. My response shapes what comes next. You don't have to force anything. You don't have to be perfect. You simply remain aware long enough for coherence to return. To make this shift tangible, let's walk through 3 real-world scenes: money, relationships, and leadership, and see how the turning point unfolds in each one. Scene 1. Money. Imagine opening your banking app and seeing a number that makes your stomach drop. Before, your reaction would come instantly, shoulders tightening, breath shortening, thoughts racing into old narratives. I'm failing. I'll never catch up. Everything is slipping. That state would reinforce the story, and the story would produce frantic strategies: overworking, snapping at people, shutting down, or making impulsive decisions. The loop would tighten. But now, you notice the moment the breath changes. You feel the contraction forming. You feel the story rising. Instead of merging with it, you pause, one oval breath. The breath doesn't change the number in your account, but it changes you. Your state shifts from collapse to coherence. And from coherence, a new story emerges. This is information, not identity. That story produces a different strategy: clarity instead of panic, planning instead of spiraling, communication instead of hiding. You may even sense possibilities you couldn't see when the loop was in control. The money didn't change, but your field did. And the outer world eventually follows the inner shift. Scene 2. Relationships. Imagine you're in a conversation with someone you love. They say something sharp, maybe unintentionally, maybe out of their own loop, and immediately your chest tightens. The old narrative lights up. I'm not valued. They're pulling away. I have to defend myself. Before, you would have reacted inside that story, voices rising, tears forming, shutting down, withdrawing. But now, you feel the tightening at its earliest stage. You feel the breath hitch. You feel the meaning forming. You observe it. That single act of awareness breaks the automatic chain. In that pause, something beautiful happens. You realize the other person is also in a loop. They're also reacting from old stories, old wounds, old patterns. The space you create inside yourself becomes space for them too. You respond from presence instead of pain. You say, "That landed a little sharply, can we slow down?" Or, "Help me understand what you meant." This simple coherence disrupts both loops, and the connection deepens because you brought awareness into a moment that usually collapses. Scene 3. Leadership. Imagine you're at work, and a problem arises, something urgent, unexpected, complicated. The old version of you might react instantly, tightening, micromanaging, rushing, over-explaining, absorbing responsibility that isn't yours, or shutting down to avoid mistakes. That reaction affects everyone around you. Incoherence spreads. But now, you catch the shift. You feel the surge of urgency trying to take over. You take one oval breath, letting coherence return before strategy begins. That breath doesn't slow down the team, it stabilizes them. From coherence, you ask clearer questions. You delegate with clarity instead of pressure. You communicate without leaking fear. And the field of the group reorganizes around your grounded presence. You didn't just lead the task, You led the atmosphere. This is what it means to shift from victim to creator. You're not creating outcomes by force. You're creating conditions through presence. The test was never whether you could control everything. The test was whether you could remain aware long enough to choose your response. And here's the subtle transformation most people don't realize they're experiencing until much later. Awareness slowly rewires your identity. You begin seeing yourself not as the one who collapses, but as the one who notices. Not as the one who spirals, but as the one who returns. Not as the one who reacts, but as the one who chooses. Your sense of I shifts from the storm to the sky, from the courtyard to the inner chamber, from nefesh to neshama. And once your identity shifts, the world begins responding to the version of you that is coherent, rather than the version of you that is overwhelmed. You don't need dramatic breakthroughs for this turning point to happen. You just need one moment, one breath of awareness at the right time. That single moment reorients your entire field. It introduces a new timeline, a new possibility, a new version of you capable of meeting life with clarity instead of collapse. This is where your power lives, not in controlling the storm, but in remembering you're the sky behind it. And from that sky, you can shape your next moment, your next choice, your next story, and slowly, your entire reality. As this journey deepens, something essential begins to reveal itself not as a technique, not as a performance, but as a truth that has always belonged to you. Awareness is not a skill you learn. It is a home you return to. And when you return often enough, the landscape of your life starts to look different. What once felt overwhelming becomes workable. What once felt personal becomes understandable. What once felt like fate becomes simply a pattern awaiting your presence. This is where philosophy stops living in books and starts living in your breath. Because the heart of every wisdom tradition, every spiritual lineage, every contemplative practice is this: you are not separate from the intelligence moving through your life. You are inseparable from it. You are shaped by it and shaping it at the same time. Stillness is not the opposite of action. Stillness is the foundation from which meaningful action arises. Yet most people have been conditioned to believe that stillness is laziness, or passivity, or indulgence. So they rush from task to task, crisis to crisis, identity to identity, hoping that movement will create meaning. But movement without awareness becomes noise. It becomes repetition. It becomes the loop. When you begin choosing stillness, not the kind that avoids life, but the kind that meets it with clear perception, something profound shifts inside you. You start recognizing that your dignity doesn't come from accomplishment. It comes from presence. It comes from the simple, undeniable truth that your being has value. Before you produce anything, before you solve anything, before you impress anyone. This is a radical idea in a world obsessed with speed and comparison. But awareness invites you to step outside that race entirely. When you observe your reactions instead of merging with them, you discover that you don't have to earn your right to exist. You already belong. You belong to this moment, to this breath, to this body, to this life. Belonging isn't something you achieve. It's something you remember. And that remembering softens you. It makes you kinder to yourself, gentler with your imperfections, more patient with your humanity. The philosopher Rilke once said, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final." Awareness allows you to live that truth not by surrendering to chaos, but by witnessing it from a place of inner spaciousness. You begin to realize that emotions are not verdicts, they are visitors. Thoughts are not commands, they are suggestions. Reactions are not prophecies, they are echoes. And the observer in you is the one constant presence, steady and quiet, watching everything move across your inner sky without losing itself in the weather. From this space, meaning becomes something you participate in rather than something that crashes into you. Life becomes a dialogue rather than an assault. Even suffering, which once felt like punishment or abandonment, begins to reveal its contours differently. You start to see that difficulty often contains instruction, not moral instruction, not cosmic reward and punishment, but simple, compassionate guidance. Notice this. Stay awake here. Don't abandon yourself now. Pain stops being proof that you're failing. It becomes a reminder to return to the observer, to step back into coherence, to breathe into the inner chamber rather than collapse into the courtyard. What emerges from this shift is a deeper sense of agency, not the brittle, ego-driven version that tries to control every variable, but the grounded agency that knows, I can meet this moment with what I choose, not with what I fear. You begin to trust yourself not because you're perfect, but because you're present. And presence is far more reliable than perfection ever could be. Presence allows you to repair after mistakes, reconnect after conflict, recalibrate after overwhelm. Presence allows you to respond to life rather than reenact your past inside it. And slowly, almost gently, this presence becomes a form of public art. People feel it in your company. Children relax around it. Animals gravitate toward it. Conversations deepen in its glow. You become someone who brings coherence into rooms without announcing it. Someone who organizes chaos simply by not adding to it. This is not performance. It is resonance. Stillness communicates in ways language never can. As you live more from the observer state, your sense of meaning changes too. You no longer chase grand purposes or cosmic assignments. You find meaning in noticing, meaning in returning, meaning in the small, often invisible choices that shift the field. The breath before speaking, the softening before reacting, the pause before interpreting. These tiny movements create the largest ripples, and from them, a quieter kind of confidence grows. A confidence rooted not in control but in coherence. This is the dignity of awareness, the recognition that you matter not because of what you produce, but because of the quality of consciousness you bring to the world. This is the belonging of awareness, the recognition that you are already woven into the fabric of existence. And this is the meaning of awareness, that your presence, your noticing, your breath, are part of the ongoing creation of your life, not passive spectators to it. You don't have to transcend your humanity. You simply have to inhabit it with clarity. And as you do, you become the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming, the quiet, steady link between past patterns and future possibilities. You become the one who notices, and that changes everything. Before you go, I want to guide you through a brief ritual, not a performance, not a technique to get right, but a way to seal this understanding into your field so it can travel with you into the moments that matter. Remember, this is educational, contemplative guidance. If anything feels uncomfortable, return to your natural breath and simply stay aware. First, wherever you are, let your shoulders drop just a little. Not dramatically, just enough to signal to your system that you are safe in this moment. Bring your awareness to your breath, and let's take 3 coherent breaths together. Breath 1. Inhale smoothly, as if drawing light into the center of your chest. Exhale gently, feeling a subtle softening across your ribs, your jaw, your belly. No forcing, no shaping, just an easy arrival. Breath 2. Inhale as though you are widening the inner space around your thoughts. Exhale as though you are settling into a deeper seat inside yourself, into the quiet room behind all the noise. Breath 3. Inhale for clarity. Exhale for coherence. Feel the field around you becoming a little more spacious, a little more organized, a little more aligned. Now, bring to mind one word, a single quality you want to embody as the observer. Choose something simple, something that feels like an anchor. It could be clarity, peace, presence, courage, patience, truth, or any word that resonates with the version of you who notices rather than reacts. Let this word appear without thinking too hard. Let it rise from the quiet place behind your breath. Hold that word gently in your awareness, as though placing it in the center of your inner temple. Feel the subtle shift as your nervous system registers it not as a command, but as a compass. Now, place your hand lightly on your chest, right over the place where your breath begins, and quietly, either out loud or in your mind, repeat this declaration. I choose to, your word, as the observer. Say it softly but clearly, not with force, with sincerity, with the calm assurance of someone stepping onto a new inner path. This declaration isn't magic. It's alignment. It's coherence. It's you choosing the state from which your next moment will unfold. When you speak this phrase, you interrupt the old loop. You invite awareness into the threshold where reaction usually takes over, and you make a small but powerful promise to yourself. To notice, even briefly, the doorway that opens before you react. Now, imagine your next difficult moment, the text that stings, the comment that triggers you, the fear that rises unexpectedly. Rather than fearing it, imagine meeting it the way a mountain meets the wind, not by resisting the gust, but by remaining unshaken in your own presence. Imagine feeling the breath shift, noticing it, and remembering your word. Imagine choosing your response from this place of coherence. This is how the observer grows, not through dramatic transformation, but through hundreds of tiny returns to awareness. Each return is a recalibration. Each return is a form of self-respect. Each return is a quiet act of creation. So as you leave this space, carry your word with you. Let it be the tone of your breath, the shape of your pauses, the quality of your choices. And if this journey resonated with you, if you felt something soften, or open, or realign, then I invite you to subscribe to this frequency, not just to follow a channel, but to stay connected to a way of being that honors your inner clarity. Because you were meant to notice. You were meant to step through the gap. You were meant to pass the test not by perfection, but by presence. And you're doing it breath by breath. When you're ready, take one final coherent inhale and a gentle exhale. You are the observer now. Carry that with you.